A White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, has tested positive for COVID. And of course, the question was, well, when was she with Joe Biden and what's going on? And it actually turns out that she hasn't been around Joe Biden for a little bit and is not on Joe Biden's current trip to Europe, apparently because many in her family had tested positive. So here's the report from CNN. Psaki tests positive for COVID, last saw Biden Tuesday. White House press secretary Jen Psaki, who dropped off President Joe Biden's international trip shortly before he departed, has tested positive for coronavirus after members of her household did. Psaki said she last saw Biden Tuesday outside while masked before the president departed for Rome for the Group of 20 summit, and that she tested negative several times in between. Psaki said she was disclosing the positive test result, quote, out of an abundance of transparency, adding she experienced mild symptoms and is working remotely. It's unlikely Psaki could have infected Biden with COVID-19, several physicians told CNN Sunday. Based on the timeline of Ms. Psaki's testing negative for multiple days following her last encounter with Biden, which was also outside and masked, therefore very low risk in and of itself, Dr. Leanna Wen, a CNN medical analyst and former Baltimore City Health Commissioner, said in an email. The White House announced Thursday Psaki would no longer join Biden on his trip abroad for at least the first few days, citing a family emergency. White House Deputy Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre instead traveled with the president. Jen Psaki put out a statement about this, where she said on Wednesday, in coordination with senior leadership at the White House and the medical team, I made the decision not to travel with on the foreign trip with the president due to a family emergency, which was members of my household testing positive for COVID-19. Since then, I have quarantined and tested negative via PCR for COVID on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. However, today I tested positive for COVID. While I have not had close contact in person with the president or senior members of the White House staff since Wednesday and tested negative for 4 days after that last contact, I am disclosing today's positive test out of an abundance of transparency. I last saw the president on Tuesday when we sat outside more than 6 feet apart and wore masks. Thanks to the vaccine, I have only experienced mild symptoms, which has enabled me to continue working from home. I plan to return to work in person at the conclusion of the 10-day quarantine following a negative rapid test, which is an additional White House requirement beyond CDC guidance, taken out of an abundance of caution. So she's vaccinated, so is Joe Biden. Outside, masks, 2 vaccinated people, transmission risk is almost zero. I don't say zero because strange things happen when you have bell curve distributions of things and unexplainable things happen. Incredibly unlikely that Joe Biden would get COVID in this case. She correctly assesses her risk is lower and her risk of a serious case is lower because she's vaccinated. That's true. Now, there are people, opportunists, and just ignorant people who will see this and once again, much like with the death of Colin Powell, say this is proof that the vaccines don't work. And of course, any one anecdote doesn't tell us much about, at a population level, what does and doesn't work about vaccines. The fact that Colin Powell died despite being vaccinated, given that he was 84 and immunocompromised in more than one way, doesn't really tell us anything about the effect at a population level of vaccination. In much the same way, when Jen Psaki says, thanks to the vaccine, I have mild symptoms, that's not really an empirical statement. Statistically speaking, she's likely to have fewer symptoms thanks to being vaccinated. Any individual, though, it's harder to make such a statement, but her general assessment is correct. By being vaccinated, she's at lower risk for a serious case. And unfortunately, there are many people who either don't understand the science or don't want to understand it because they have preconceived notions or desires about what they believe the vaccine to do, where they will say, what's the point of getting vaccinated? Psaki was vaccinated and she got it. Well, she's working at home and she seems to feel mostly okay. So that's the latest. Very unlikely that Joe Biden could have received the virus or that she would have spread the virus to Joe Biden in the situation that was described, particularly when she continued testing negative for several days. One of our sponsors is Four Sigmatic, the company best known for their delicious mushroom coffee. Four Sigmatic's mushroom coffee is organic, fair trade, single origin Arabica coffee with both lion's mane and chaga mushrooms. Chaga mushrooms have actually been shown to have potential in supporting the immune system in peer-reviewed studies. I've been drinking Four Sigmatic coffee a lot lately. It actually doesn't taste anything like mushrooms. It just tastes like any delicious coffee, but it's really easy on my stomach, doesn't give me any jittery feeling or a midday crash, and they have over 20,000 five-star reviews. And best of all, if you don't love it, you'll get 100% of your money back because they stand behind their product. You've got nothing to lose by giving it a try. Four Sigmatic is giving my audience up to 40% off and free shipping when you go to foursigmatic.com/Pacman. The link is right underneath this video.